Okay, so let's jump into the petition itself. And I must say, I really had fun reading it.
I had fun writing it.
Did you? Did you really?
Yeah. Yes, cool.
I would think so.
Mhm.
All right, so let's go in here. Yeah, that's the one. Can you read it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so this is the beginning, and this paragraph here actually just in a nutshell tells you what it does. It says, we ask the Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, which is Marty Makary, to deem Moderna's Spikevax, beautiful name, and all its currently marketed biologics license application, BLA versions, including mNext Spike and Pfizer-BioNTech's Comirnaty, and all its BLA versions misbranded. You know, you call it water, but it's really sewage. And that he initiates corrective actions at the agency's disposal, including revoking the BLA for these vaccines due to a lack of compliance with FDA regulations for the reasons set forth herein. All right. And then, yeah, it's misbranded. So the argument here is this is misbranded. And I thought this is actually a really nice way of putting it, because I would consider this outright fraud. Misbranding doesn't sound so bad, but it's really fraud.
Well, misbranding is the fraud. And in fact, adulteration and misbranding as problems, like the manufacturers advertising something that it's not, putting false labels, putting false claims, medicinal false claims, and having contaminants in the products. That was the reason why the FDA was established to begin with. It's to prevent that from happening. It's their job. Their only job is to regulate interstate commerce. By the way, they're not supposed to advertise products for pharmaceutical companies. They're not supposed to go and shill for Pfizer or Moderna or for Ozempic or for hormone replacement therapies. That's not their job. Their job is simply this. It's make sure the manufacturers are not misbranding and not adulterating the products that enter interstate commerce. That's how the FDCA is written. And so that's their job that they're not doing here. This is what we're telling them to, you need to do this.
Maybe you can answer this question about this interstate commerce, because that came up in the petition over and over again. It's for the purpose of interstate commerce. So what if a state says, oh, well, this is just for, let's say, New York. We're not going to sell it to Vermont or anybody else. We're just going to use it inside New York. So in that case, does none of this apply?
Well, in principle, this can happen, I believe. So as I said, the FDA as a federal agency authority, we have in the U.S. Legal law or governance, states maintain all the rights that are not delegated to the federal agencies. The FDA, as I said, was established to say, well, for purposes of interstate commerce, so stuff that gets shipped all over the United States, well, we need a central federal regulatory agency that can prevent misbranding and adulteration, and it's more efficient, and we have more expertise centralized, and also all sorts of good things. And so the states say, okay, yeah, we sign up to that system. Now, in principle, and that already started sort of happening, because there are a lot of states that are, they hate RFK Jr., they hate what HHS is doing right now, even though, I maintain they're not doing much in this area yet. But there's already a huge movement of the blue states, California, New York, some other, Illinois, some other states, banding together and saying, well, we're not going to follow CDC recommendations or HHS recommendations. We're going to develop our own recommendations. In principle, they can do it. It remains to be seen what they're going to do here. They started doing it, as I said already, on the vaccine recommendation and schedule and enforcement and mandates and things like that. But in principle, today, FDA's mandate is to regulate interstate commerce in drugs and food and ensure proper labeling. That's their number one job.
Okay, interesting. And then it also says here that misbranding is a legal designation. So it constitutes, as it says, a violation of federal law that can trigger seizure, injunction, criminal penalties, and or license revocation. So it's not some light little thing. No, it's
It is a crime. Actually, it is a very serious crime to misbrand or adulterate products in interstate commerce. And FDA has huge number of different enforcement mechanisms that they can apply, including violence, by the way. So they have, you've heard the stories where they will go and destroy a farm that sells raw milk.
Yes.
Using these powers. But for some reason, they are unable to do anything about mRNA shots.
Yeah, because raw milk is way more dangerous, as everybody knows. So I really like this sentence here. Vaccines can reach the arms of Americans, can reach their bloodstreams under investigational or non-investigational pathways that are separate and distinct, like these two pipes. And you already talked about the non-investigational emergency use authorization and the investigational pathway, which leads to this BLA approval. And that is such an important word, this investigational, because investigational means you really investigate something. You research it, you found out exactly what it is, what needs to be in there, how people react to it, how it reacts in the body, all this stuff, how safe it is. You do all these toxicology studies and pharmacological studies. Whereas non-investigational, if I understand that correctly, means the exact opposite. You're not even interested in finding out anything. I mean, you're not investigating.
Exactly. So this is how the EUA law is written. And again, that took a long time to figure out this key distinction, investigational versus non-investigational. Once you understand it, it becomes super clear what happened here. So investigational means, so the clinical trials, for example, legal clinical trials that are used for purposes of drug approval in the US, legally defined as clinical investigation. They're not called clinical trials, they're called clinical investigation. That means that they're bound. It's kind of like you enter in a contractual legal obligation with FDA as a manufacturer, with FDA, by opening an investigational new drug application and then completing everything, that file, under this umbrella of the law. And it means that all of the Food and Drugs and Cosmetics enforceable regulations are applied to you and your product. So that's like saying, I am going to do everything on this pathway and I'm entering into the contractual obligation. And also FDA has contractual obligations, like they're supposed to respond to you in a certain time frame and a certain manner, and it's all very, very orchestrated and specified in law. What happens if parties are deviating from it, and what are the remedies? Now, the non-investigational pathway is just like that sewage pipe. None of this applies. It just says from the start of this, none of this stuff applies. Because non-investigational it really is a distribution it's a mass distribution mechanism of supplies in case of emergency. It's not a regulatory pathway on any kind, and the U.S. law is very explicit about it. It's non-regulatory. It's not used for approving new drugs or devices. That's how you need to understand it.
Yes, and that is so astounding that I wonder why it even exists. I mean, if it's so useless, if it's really truly non-investigational, and it is, then you ask yourself, well, why would you even in a true emergency use something like that? Does it even make sense to have something like that?
Right. So I would say it doesn't make sense. Well, let's say it doesn't. So I'll tell you how it was justified to U.S. Congress. So this is part of the PrEP Act, this investigational, non-investigational EUA countermeasure stuff. It's part of the PrEP Act, which was put on as law in the U.S. in 2005. On Christmas, in the middle of the night, on the weekend, by Republicans in Congress. The Democrats in Congress opposed it, including Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, who said this is unconstitutional. I agree with them. It's unconstitutional.
Yeah.
But the law was passed. And so the justification for it was, well, what if we have some severe, very dire situations, such as attacks of chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear weapons on the U.S., and then we should have some sort of a mass distribution of supplies mechanism, especially to the emergency responders. And we can't apply the same liability laws or regulatory laws to those activities. And so for that reason, we do need this non-investigational pathway, EUA. And, you could argue, I am against this, but you could say, okay, well, for that dire situation, maybe it's okay. But now that's not what it's being used for. They immediately started using it as a laundromat. By they, I mean the Department of Defense and military industrial pharmaceutical complex. They immediately started using it as laundromat to buy unregulated concoctions of biologics primarily and other things that nobody needed and put it into strategic national stockpile and pay obscene prices to their crony corporations. So that's what it was used for about 20 years until 2020. That's when they went ahead and applied it to entire world civilian population and obviously lied about the status of this because even, as I said, as a professional, I never knew this existed. It took me a long time to figure it out. And, God help any regular person trying to figure this out.
And that is really amazing, Sasha, because you worked for 25 years in research and development of the pharmaceutical industry, right? So I would have thought that someone like you would have known about this fundamental distinction and about the existence of this. And if you didn't know, then it stands to reason that nobody else knew.
Nobody else who was speaking against it knew.
Well, nobody else who was, yes, exactly. But
Apparently
nobody
people
else,
on the
like
inside
in
knew
your
this.
position, who, yes, of course, yeah, that's true. There were definitely people who knew about this. But, the vast number of people in the pharmaceutical industry,
Idea.
Had no idea that this
No
even
idea.
existed.
And I'm sure a lot of majority of Pfizer employees don't know about this. A lot of FDA employees probably have no idea about this. It's only a select group of people who participated in the DoD, DARPA projects, BARDA projects, buying these EUA countermeasures for stock. They knew this mechanism, and they probably participated to enrich themselves.
Yes, yeah. So in this first part of the petition, the this non-investigational pathway is described, what it actually means. So, for example, there is no, for EUA products, there is, for the development of those, there is no institutional review board, which plays an important role usually when you don't do the EUA pathway. And there's none of these adherence, as you already said, to all the other clinical trial requirements. You don't even have to do a clinical trial, do you? You're not required to do any clinical trials, as far as I know. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. As for EUA countermeasure pathway, you're not required to do clinical trial. It's not possible to do a clinical trial. As I said, the product is designated non-investigational, so you can't do a clinical investigation with it legally.
Right. But yes, right.
The manufacturer may volunteer to do studies. You could do studies that are not clinical trials. There are plenty of...
But they did what they called, so Pfizer and Moderna and Pfizer, I mean, this famous clinical trial that they did, they called it a clinical trial. Everybody thought it was a clinical trial, but it wasn't really a clinical trial. That was also misbranding, wasn't it? That was not a proper clinical trial at all.
Yeah, this was lying to trial participants and even to the trial administrators, the clinical sites. So they lied and they said that, we're enrolling in a clinical trial, but it's not a clinical trial. And there was no formal IRB or informed consent. And actually, this is what, if you've talked to Brooke Jackson, you know about her case. So Brooke Jackson, who is still suing Pfizer for fraud under False Claims Act, she was a clinical trial manager, and she noticed immediately on the Pfizer clinical studies that she was supposed to audit that that's what was going on. There was a lot of fraud. They were not consenting people properly. They were not using informed consent properly. There were a lot of other violations, severe violations, which would, in normal clinical trial, would immediately put it on hold or remove that site and do investigation. But instead, she was immediately fired. And
yes, after a few days, I don't know, 10 days, 30 days or something like that.
She was fired. In fact, she was fired 6 hours after she reported this to the FDA. So clearly FDA was in on it, and FDA told Pfizer, told the contractor to fire her. And obviously they knew what they were doing. They knew that they were on non-investigational pathway. They were lying to clinical trial participants. But the law didn't obligate them. But as I said, they were lying.
Yeah, and they lied obviously to the participants in the clinical trials, but they lied to the public. I mean, they told the public, and the media reported a lot about these clinical trials, and then of course the outcome, and that allegedly they were very favorable to these vaccines. They lied to the public, and they had to, because I mean, if there had not been clinical trials, or if people had been informed that these clinical trials didn't really deserve that label, that weren't true clinical trials, then nobody would have taken this shot. A shot under emergency use authorization that was known, although nobody knew what that meant, that didn't go through any proper clinical trials, nobody would have taken that shot. Well, maybe the occasional crazy person, but like 99.9% of the population would have just refused. And it would have been impossible for the government to mandate this. That would have been impossible to do.
Yeah.
So this is a deceit, and this misbranding as a proper clinical trial, something that was just a charade, which Brooks found out very, very quickly, just within a few days. That is another giveaway that they were intentionally deceiving and leading the American people down a path that would end up with them being injected with this poison into their bloodstream.
Yes.
I don't see any other way of interpreting it. And Pfizer and Moderna, as you said, they were not obligated to run any trials. They could have said, no, we're not going to do it. But of course, there must have been discussions. Well, what are we going to do? We are doing this EUA path. We don't really have to do clinical trials. And they would have been told, well, I mean, are you crazy? Of course, you have to do something that looks like a clinical trial. We have to keep up a facade of everything. Everything is above board, and everything is done strictly to regulations and guidelines. And there's nothing to see here and nothing to fear.
Yeah.
It's so devious. It's so unbelievably devious. And it's also it's well organized.
It's very well
organized.
We see a lot of premeditation. Well, so number one evidence of premeditation is that it's all in the U.S. law. And that took over 20 years to put on the books. And lawmaking is an intentional act. So you have a series of intentional acts, all making all of this legal. How can you say that this was some sort of random occurrence and it wasn't premeditated? It was clearly premeditated. And then, of course, we have all this internal and external communications from FDA showing that they knew exactly what they were doing. Pfizer knew exactly what they were doing. The fire broke because she blew the whistle. And then and to date, they still maintain that this was proper investigational process, except some corners were cut, maybe some, Trump maintains that, I cut the red tape, I pushed the FDA, it was all me. I mean, it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. This is the truth.
Yes. Yeah. So let's see, you talk about that during the Operation Warp Speed, the FDA granted COVID-19 mRNA vaccines EUA status. That happened in December 2020, and waiving all the legal requirements of IRB oversight, clinical trials, and current good manufacturing and laboratory practices. They are abbreviated CGXP. So this compliance with these good manufacturing and lab practices, that was all waived. And these are strictly required for the IND and the new drug development and biologic license application pathways. Yeah. So, and then, as we already said, August 2021, Pfizer got the full BLA license, just slapped on, just like that. And in January 2022, Moderna followed also with full BLA approval. Wow, it's just breathtaking.
Yeah.
So let's go a little bit further down. Yes, and here you also point out again, the most egregious of the FDA's violations is that the only human clinical studies for COVID-19 vaccines were conducted under an EUA pathway that lacked IRB oversight and were not legally compliant clinical investigations. Yes, they were just a joke. And the result was a joke as well. And that was the whole purpose. It was to show just to dupe the American public and make them comfortable to get the shot into their arms.
Yeah. Actually, on the clinical trials, another case you probably heard of is Brianne Dressen, that's suing AstraZeneca. She was one of the clinical trial participants in AstraZeneca studies, and so it came to the absurdity in the most recent court hearing, where I think they're appealing now. So she signed, as a clinical trial participant, she signed a contract, paperwork that said that if she's injured as part of this research, she will get full compensation from the company for treating her injuries, disability, whatever. And of course, she got severely injured. She's disabled. And AstraZeneca completely turned around and said, go away. They didn't make good on that contract, and they offered her something like $3,000 in compensation for she's fully disabled now. So she's been suing for quite some time now. And in the most recent hearing, they were arguing, AstraZeneca was arguing that they don't need to, even if they wrote in the contract that they signed that they will pay, they can lie to the clinical trial participant because the PrEP Act says that it absolves them from suit and liability. So they're saying Bree cannot even bring a suit against us. So it is fully okay for us to lie to the clinical trial participants under PrEP Act.
Yeah. And so the PrEP Act, not only a license to kill, but also a license to lie and to kind of like anything you want. Yeah, I read the transcript, and that was just incredible how the judges or the prosecutor, the dialogue they had, it was like
it's
was like
of if Hollywood
fantasy or something.
Yeah, if Hollywood was honest, there's so much material here to make amazing films, and that was like absurdist theater in its purest form. It was actually really enjoyable. It was funny. I mean, if it weren't so terrible, it would be kind of funny. It was you wrote about it. You have on your Substack. So if anybody was interested to read the transcripts, go there and have a look. Okay, so this is also an important point. This petition is not arguing, it says here, about the safety or efficacy of marketed COVID-19 mRNA vaccines, but rather violations of BLA labeling standards under the law. And I think that is very smart, because trying to discuss safety and efficacy, that hasn't brought us anywhere in the last years, right? Yeah, this is critical. And by the way, I just did a recent summary of mainstream coverage of our petition, which is scant, but some mainstream outlets mentioned it, including even New York Times did a very, very brief mention of it, even though it's funny. So let's step back. I actually talked extensively with the New York Times journalist about PrEP Act, about what's going on, about this petition. So they know full well what's going on here, yet a different reporter wrote an article basically discussing stuff that's happening with HHS, and just one brief mention that, this petition was also filed. They're all honing in, and the mainstream publications that did cover this, they're all claiming, these are just technicalities. No, science. You need to pay attention to science. You need to pay. This is all about safety and efficacy. It's all safe and effective. Trust the experts. All these people, they're just bringing up little fine print and technicalities. Key to this, they're deathly afraid of this fine print and technicality because it's the law. And they all want you to go on a wild goose chase to find that gold standard science at the end of the rainbow in, maybe 50 years from now, and agree on some scientific consensus. That's why everyone was pushed into that corner. It was actually quite easy to argue. Well, first they were censoring everyone, but then remember they started letting up. And there are some really big health freedom accounts today that all they do is post safety, efficacy, look at my data type of stuff. and they're promoted, they're okay, they won't be censored. I'm censored on all sides. Even when I talk to the New York Times reporter who is very interested and knows what I wrote and actually read and listened to my videos, comes very informed, he can't publish.
Yeah.
He can't publish. They don't want this out. They don't want you to know that you shouldn't pay attention to safety and efficacy, that safety and efficacy does not apply to these things at all.
Mm-hmm.
They are afraid of this one statement.
You know, the nice thing about this is if you understand truly what happened here, if you understand the violations of the BLA labeling standards under the law, then you know everything about the safety and efficacy of these alleged vaccines.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
understand that they are not safe. All right, so let's go a little bit further down. Here it says burden is on the FDA, of course, to prove that all BLA standards were satisfied when it fully licensed Pfizer's and Moderna's vaccines, which it cannot do. Did it do that when it gave it approval? Did it have some sort of a table with all the required tests and all the requirements that needed to be done, clinical trials, etc.? No, it didn't have that. It couldn't. It is impossible to do it because that stuff wasn't done. So the actions that requested are very simple. Petitioners ask the FDA to revoke all BLAs for every mRNA COVID-19 vaccine for all demographic groups because manufacturers do not and have never met BLA standards. And then, of course, FDA failed to enforce these standards, which is the job of the FDA. And then, point 4 here, I think I want to point out, petitioners ask the FDA to properly designate every mRNA COVID-19 vaccine as an emergency use authorization biologic, as it used to, which it was in the beginning, as long as the HHS Secretary's Declaration of Emergency is in effect. And it is in effect. And now that way more people know about, because of your work and Debbie's work, so many people know about the emergency use authorization and what it really means. So, and the FDA would have to tell the public, oh, oops, if they would grant the petition, and I don't think they will, but if they were, they would have to say, well, we made a terrible mistake. And the mistake is actually so terrible that we shouldn't exist anymore. We should fire everybody here and rebuild this agency from scratch. But we made a horrible mistake and we mislabeled this and so sorry, but we are going back to emergency use authorization. It's inconceivable that this will happen.
Yeah,
but I also don't think that's the point of the petition.
Well, right, and so we kind of lay out all the actions that are possible here. So you can remove this, or you can tell people the truth, but you can't continue keeping it under BLA and continue lying to the public. That's not acceptable. So, and then every citizen petition has is a section that is called statement of grounds, where you kind of make your case, right? And we don't have to go through all of this. There's a lot. This is pages and pages of pages with lots and lots of examples. We can have a look at some of them, but this page here is very interesting because it gives you a table comparing the individual features for the IND/BLA pathways, so for drugs and biologics, with the EUA pathway in a nice little summary. And it also gives the applicable status, the United States laws, where you can read this. So status for EUA pathway, it's non-investigational use. We talked about that. Purpose is emergency distribution. IRB oversight, that is this review board. Is it internal review board? It's institutional review board. Institutional review board. Okay, is not required, so it doesn't exist. Informed consent, not required, and that's actually really interesting with the informed consent in the EUA. There is no informed consent. Can you talk about that a little bit more, Sasha? Because you can't really give informed consent because nobody knows what's in this stuff. It's non-investigational. Or can you inform someone about something that nobody knows about? It's not possible. But there is something that in the EUA that says you have to tell people that this is an emergency use authorized product, and you actually have to tell people that there are risks connected to the use of it because nobody really knows what it is. Yeah, so Catherine Watt wrote quite extensively about this whole informed consent issue. It's a very complex issue, stems back obviously from Nuremberg trials and Nazi experiments, and it was never codified. Like actually, Nuremberg is not part of the U.S. law. It never was codified in the U.S. law. It is in some other countries, but not in the U.S. But informed consent has been debated, and there's a lot of ethics, bioethics conventions and things like that that govern it. So the role of the institutional review board, it's supposed to be an independent body, usually of composed of academics, researchers. There are multiple. Every research university has their own, and then there are private ones where manufacturers can go and apply. But they involve also members of the public, sometimes patient community, and their job is to review the protocol of the proposed clinical investigation and assure that it's not just an experimentation on unsuspecting humans, that it has oversight, that the human subject safety is protected properly. There are some safeguards that say, something dangerous is being done. That means you have to be right next to the ICU, all sorts of things. And importantly, that the subjects participating in the trial have received full disclosure that they agree to participate completely voluntarily, that there's no undue pressure. For example, myself, I ran several contract research organizations in the industry. As an employer, I could not ask my coworkers, my employees to participate in clinical trials. That would be a big no-no. However, for the military, somehow it's totally okay to have soldiers, say, volunteer all the time for these experiments. So there are a lot of ethical considerations, a lot of guidelines exist, and the role of the IRB is to ensure that they're all followed, that all the clinical trial participants actually have benefit from participating in this clinical investigation. It's very, very formal process that happens, and then the manufacturer is bound to adhere to all these guidelines. So this is suspended. This does not exist for EUA. And informed consent also is not part of the EUA because it's not possible to do, again, for the same reasons we've discussed. Now, EUA status requires whoever the recipients of EUA to receive what's called information sheet. And the information sheet needs to contain all known risks, whatever they are, and also very explicitly state that you can accept or deny it, and of course it cannot be mandated.
Exactly. That's a very important point. It cannot be mandated. So anything that is under EUA cannot be mandated. So you cannot say, so all this law that companies with more than 100 employees had to mandate their employees to get the shot. That is illegal. That is not possible.
Yeah.
That should be possible. That should never have happened. And if you go, let me see. And of course, the current good manufacturing practice compliance is not required.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's your sewage here in this.
Yeah.
Or maybe this is interesting. A drug can be fully approved, and then it can come under an EUA for an unapproved use. So an unapproved use of an approved drug like remdesivir that hadn't been approved for COVID.
Remdesivir wasn't approved either.
Yeah.
You can't. Yeah, this is another very, very key point. Is there also FDA is part of the deception, as part of propaganda. Everyone has been saying, "Oh no, look at this! Both approved and unapproved products can be EUA," and we're saying it can go one way, but not backward. So if something was previously approved, let's say a painkiller or antibiotic, was previously approved as medicine under NDA or BLA, then that product can be under emergency conditions used for unapproved indication. That's okay.
Exactly.
It can be declared EUA and used for unapproved indication during the emergency. Now it waives liability and all those other things, but the product is the product. The going backward, if something was never approved, like these mRNA shots, and you only introduce them on the market as EUA. You can't retroactively declare that now you have satisfied BLA standards also, because as we've seen, those are two separate parallel pipes that never meet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, nobody objects to having the water from the water main flow into the sewage pipe. It's kind of a waste of clean water, but there's no danger in it.
Mm-hmm. But the other way you can't do.
Yeah, the other way you can't do, or at least you shouldn't do. Apparently you can, but it's not legal. So I had this note here. So during an emergency, and then there's the link to the law, authorizes the HHA secretary to deviate.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's a quote from current good manufacturing practice requirements, otherwise applicable to the manufacture, processing, packing, or holding of products subject to regulation. So things can go wrong in all sorts of ways. It can be stored in some moldy place, or all sorts of stuff. It's not just the manufacturing; it's all sorts of other things as well. Pretty much anything that has to do with this product. Further, a countermeasure shall not be deemed adulterated or misbranded under this chapter because the secretary has authorized deviations from current good manufacturing practices.
Yeah, that's another key statement in the US law, which, as I've been saying before, it suspends all of the Food and Drugs and Cosmetics Act regulations applicable to medicines just in this one sentence for the EUA. If something is declared as EUA, it is not regulated as a medical product in the US at all. Like all of the regulations are suspended. So another deceptive, manipulative headline or attack on us from mainstream says, well, some of the procedures were not properly done, but you guys are focusing on technicalities. And we're saying, no, it's not some, it's all. The word is all. All of the regulations are suspended. These are not medical products at all.
Yeah, well, there are only two possibilities. Either they have no idea and are totally clueless and don't know what they're talking about, or they are lying.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it says here the secretary has authorized deviations. Isn't that amazing? You can just authorize a deviation.
Yeah.
Isn't that wow? So you have a really devious deviation here. You just authorize it. And so I thought, oh my God, this is so unbelievable. You can just, any law, you can just
You can just write an anti-law and put it on the US books and say, in an emergency, it's okay to violate all of this stuff.
Yeah, so you can just govern with having these with very complex laws all around you, and then just lift entire sections of law out of there and say, no, this is no longer applicable in this particular situation. We are authorizing a deviation from this particular law or practice or regulation. So I clicked on this link here, and I found something really interesting. I want to show you this. Let's go to the link. This is great, by the way, that you can just jump to the link. I really like that. Right. So this is the link to the code itself, and this is the Legal Information Institute. Very useful. So this explains the current good manufacturing practice, and it says here, the secretary may, when the circumstances of a domestic, military, or public health emergency or material threat described in subsection so-and-so, so warrant, authorize with respect to an eligible product deviations from current good manufacturing practice requirements otherwise applicable to the manufacture, processing, packing, or holding of products. That's what you quoted. And that's what it says here, black on white. And what I happen to see is this one here, which is also very interesting, the expiration date. So it says, for purposes of this subsection, what's the name of this subsection? Let's see. Yeah, here we go. It's emergency use of medical products, 21 US code. Okay, so with the expiration date, very interesting. The secretary may extend the expiration date and authorize the introduction or delivery for introduction into interstate commerce of an eligible product after the expiration date provided by the manufacturer if A, the expiration date extension is intended to support the United States' ability to protect the public health or military preparedness effectiveness, and B, the expiration date extension is supported by an appropriate scientific evaluation that is conducted or accepted by the secretary. Okay, so it basically says the expiration date, you can disregard the expiration date. And it doesn't even say anything about what the limits to the, by how much can you extend this expiration date? By a month, a year, 10 years? It doesn't say.
Exactly. So this basically says whatever we say, the expiration date, we can extend it indefinitely. And in fact, as I told you before, the Pfizer, there's a detailed shipping information for Pfizer, and Moderna now has been FOIA'd since then. And what I found is that Pfizer manufactured about 30 million doses, at least 30 million doses of their product before December 2020. So somewhere while they were conducting these pretend clinical trials and the pretend development program, before they even got the EUA rubber stamped in December, they already pre-manufactured something like 30 million doses. And those doses all have expiration date of December 31st, 2069. 2069. So that's how long they have extended these expiration dates so far.
2069.
Yeah.
That is just crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So they were manufacturing these, all this stuff. So the whole thing was just a sham. You can also see that there's a section about the email leaks and the petition. Because we have, and we did an interview about that.
Yeah.
Where you could see how these reviewers in email were saying, well, wait a minute, we have all these major objections and you cannot possibly approve this. Stop. And they were being told, shut up. I mean, it's going to be approved anyway. So either go along or, I don't know, find another job. We don't care.
Yeah. As you remember, we had, an hour or so discussion about that whole email.
Yes.
Leaks of emails. And even the senior person, Noel Wassian, that we were discussing, that then suddenly died after retiring, he didn't know this. He didn't understand this. It's clear from his emails and communications. Actually, none of them knew except maybe Emmer Cook, who was telling them all to shut up. So
yes, there's another great movie script, by the way.
Yeah, it's another great movie script.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Okay. So now I have to go back and share the other one again. Oh, what did I have here? I had another note. Oh, yes. I thought that was this is the link to the part of the law that says that people have to be informed of the significant risks. And of course, nobody was informed. Nobody was informed. And I'm going to, sorry, now I have to share this again. Okay, so here we go. This brought me to this section here. Appropriate conditions designed to ensure that individuals to whom the product is administered, so this EUA product is administered, are informed that the secretary has authorized the emergency use of the product. So they have to know, hey, listen, this is not just like some normal product. No, it's an emergency use product. And then, really important, has to be informed of the significant known and potential benefits and the significant known and potential risks of such use, and of the extent to which such benefits and risks are unknown. Which is kind of hard to do, right? The extent, I mean,
this is the funny
if you don't know it, you don't know it.
Yeah, this is a very funny language where they're saying, well, we must tell you, but we also don't know what we must tell you. Now, what the one very well-known significant risk that nobody was told, as I said, a definitively known risk, is that the law actually removes constitutional rights for the recipients of EUA countermeasures. That's known. And
yes,
now I've been saying this must be part of the information sheet and the disclosure. And nobody has ever told
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And in fact, that should be listed here. It should say, and the recipient should be that this is covered under the PrEP Act as a medical countermeasure, which means that you cannot sue in case you'll die or you get injured by the product, and you can only go to some really crappy little outlet known as the CICP, where you will never receive anything.
Exactly.
In all likelihood.
Exactly. That's definitively known.
Yeah. That is definitively known. That's right. And then this third point is also important. The recipient has to be informed of the option to accept or refuse administration of the product of the consequences, if any, of refusing administration of the product and of the alternatives to the product that are available and of their benefits and risks.
Yeah.
So
remember,
there you see again, it's illegal to mandate it.
yeah, but remember how the mainstream press and how all the employers and universities and everyone who was mandating it on the children, on pregnant women, on service members, they were all saying, "Well, we told you the consequences. We told you the consequences of getting it is going to be you're going to lose your job. So you received informed consent." That's the language that they were using here.
Oh, well, they didn't understand that there actually was that they actually meant, as the law is written, that there was a real option to say no without any kind of punishment. I mean, they weren't talking about punishing people for not doing it. It's telling them you don't have to do it. And the consequence might be that you're going to die because of this terrible illness. But when they wrote this law, they were for sure not thinking about things like punishing the person for not taking the drug.
Yeah.
This is also here, I thought was interesting. EUA products, it says in the petition, are deployed on the market based on only a maybe effective opinion of the HHA secretary and are not subject to formal product recall procedures that are applicable to regular pharmaceutical products. So you cannot recall the thing?
Yeah. So as I said, the FDA regulatory and enforcement powers actually do not apply here. So all of those enforcement powers of warnings, label adjustments, and recall and enforcement of recall, they're all sort of voluntary. That's why Pfizer and Pfizer and Moderna would like ignore a bunch of, so they ignored all the post-market commitments and FDA never enforced them. The same European Medicines Agency also, they did not comply with post-market commitments and EMA didn't enforce them because there is no formal process to do it and no legal power to do it. And so that's why that's how it's written in the law.
Yes, and they had every right not to do them because they're not required by law to do them. And in fact, it says here, manufacturers are on an honor system to self-monitor or to self-regulate or to self-whatever. Yes. So that's what it is. And then the sections after that, this is about the biologics license application and how it's different from the EUA application. And this is so interesting because it gives you this wealth of information about what needs to be done to get this BLA to when you apply for your biologics license to get the approval. It's very difficult. It's not easily done. So there are just very quickly, there are things like they have to meet the purity, potency, safety, efficacy, manufacturing compliance, labeling, disclosure / marketing compliance, and other applicable legal standard requirements. Otherwise, they don't get the BLA. They have to, well, if this is not there, then biologics are mislabeled and misbranded. Yes, absolutely. Then it goes further into the safety. So they have to prove from safety standpoint that the product causes no undue harm when used as intended, which means under EUA, it is not proven that the product causes no undue harm when used as intended. That's what it means. Purity, it has to be free from contamination or unintended substances. EUA, it doesn't have to be shown. It's in all likelihood not free from contamination or unintended substances.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost guaranteed. So
that's why I've been saying that safety and efficacy arguments are inapplicable and not going to lead to removal. A bunch of people tried to sue, tried to petition based on contaminants. And
no, it's all fine. It can be, it's all fine. It can be unsafe. It can be contaminated. It doesn't have to be pure. It doesn't have to be sterile.
It's
so here's the sterility. Each lot must be free of contaminating microorganisms. For EUA products, lots do not have to be free of contaminating microorganisms. So are we surprised that the lots were completely contaminated? Well, we shouldn't be after knowing this. Then there's potency, proven biological activity consistent with an intended therapeutic or immunologic effect. Makes perfect sense, but it means that for the EUA, you don't have to prove biological activity consistent with intended therapeutic or immunologic effect. That's what it means.
Yeah.
And then identity and constituents. Validated tests must confirm correct identity and permissible additives. No, it doesn't have to happen for EUA.
Mhm.
There are no validated tests. They don't have to confirm the correct identity. So you don't even know what's in it. Permissible additives? Nope. Expiration dating, again, we just saw, can be extended for EUA. Consistency, also important. Validated manufacturing process ensures reproducibility of quality. And I remember, Sasha, when we talked and you showed me all these different lots and you had looked at them and kind of, you had made this nice table where you showed how they differed from each other.
Yeah.
Huge variability.
Huge variability. Yeah, that's how I knew very early on in 2021. I knew that they are not good manufacturing practice compliant. So I already knew that. The fact that FDA didn't act on any of it, and this was very obvious, that was a puzzle to me for a long time. I was saying, why is FDA not acting? Why are they not using their enforcement powers to remove, to recall, to stop, to do some investigation? And that took several years to figure out why. And this is why, because under EUA, all of this is allowed and FDA has no enforcement powers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, and then as a summary, it says here in the petition, establishing manufacturing process that is compliant with the legal requirements of the BLA is complex. It typically takes many years to license an entirely new product or technology platform. Numerous compliance requirements are specified in the law, and several overarching principles must be continuously upheld.
Yeah, so another point about compliance, it's not a one-time event. The compliance must be continuously maintained. And there are numerous ways and auditing procedures that exist for regulatory compliance checking. And none of this applies.
Now that they have this full BLA approval, they are supposedly required to prove that they continuously deserve it, but they cannot possibly do that. So they will keep misbranding and keep just lying about it, because there's no way they can prove that it's compliant with all these processes. And requirements and regulations. So it's a crime that is going on, and that will never end.
Yeah.
As long as it's misbranded. It's not just like a crime at a certain point in time and then it's over. No, this is just going on. As long as this has full BLA approval, the crime is continuing. So let's see, was there anything? Yeah, you go into a lot of this. Oh yeah, I love this here. I mean, again, throughout pivotal clinical trials and post BLA, as you just said, each production lot must demonstrate lot-to-lot consistency. Doesn't have to be the case for EUA, and pass, and then all these things: identity, purity, safety, sterility, potency, and stability tests in order to meet the labeling specifications, etc., etc. If variability arises, the manufacturer must investigate and demonstrate that it does not compromise quality. Are Pfizer and Moderna doing that?
No.
They should be furiously.
No, they're not doing any of
Because
that.
there's huge variability, and they will not be able to get rid of that. Well, then, they're going to demonstrate that it does not compromise quality. Yeah. And then also this year, manufacturing process validation. Now, a lot of people don't know much about manufacturing, and myself included. So I thought it was really interesting, because the manufacturing is very complex in itself. And you touch on it here by saying, okay, so the manufacturing process validation is a vast area of law and regulation, which generally includes design qualification. So define the process and critical quality attributes. Doesn't have to happen for EUA products. Then the installation or operational qualification, verify equipment and system performance. Doesn't have to happen for EUA. Performance qualification, produce several consecutive lots that meet all release criteria under routine conditions. They wouldn't be able to do that. And of course, and they still are not able to do that, I would think.
So part of that EMA leak that we discussed, there was a manufacturing documentation existing for Pfizer at the time, and there was none for Moderna at the time. And that was end of November 2020. So 2 weeks before all of this went on the global market. They did not even define the first bullet. So it wasn't defined completely well. There were a lot of pushback from EMA reviewers on it because they didn't even know what their critical quality attributes should be, or they proposed some.
That's shocking.
Yeah, they proposed a list of critical quality attributes what Pfizer proposed, but there was no even validated assays to then test against. So it was like a black box talking to a black box. And that, just even the first thing was not done. And 2 weeks later, it's all on the global market and billions of doses.
Well, no wonder these guys were upset.
Yeah, and by the way,
No
still
wonder.
today, the USP, US Pharmacopoeia, which is like a standards body in the US for pharmaceuticals, they still have conferences and debates of what those critical quality attributes should be and how to measure them. To this day, nobody knows.
And then it says that for continued BLA license, the above mentioned requirements, so all these manufacturing process validation and all the other stuff are fully enforceable by the FDA. So that's the responsibility of the FDA. That's why it's there, to enforce these things. And it's not doing that. On the contrary, it's giving them the approval. I mean, forget about enforcing. It's just wipes away the whole thing and slaps the approval on there. So okay, and then it goes through the preclinical compliance requirements for BLA. It's a ton of stuff. It's really complicated. So that is exactly what you have done when you worked in the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah. So
that look at all these studies here: toxicology studies, local tolerance studies, biodistribution studies. And they did this on rats, and they knew how it distributed and concentrated in the ovaries and liver and spleen and etc. They knew that. Immunopathology or adjuvant safety studies, like the lipid nanoparticles that are so toxic, safety pharmacology, none of this has to be done for EUA products.
Yeah. And the simplest thing to understand we talk about is the preclinical studies or animal studies must be completed and all the results reviewed before clinical trials in humans can begin. And that's part of the protecting safety of the human participants in clinical trials. And this wasn't done. The preclinical studies were done after the clinical studies already were initiated. So they were lying to the clinical trial participants and experimenting on humans before they even did any animal studies.
Yes, and that's interesting with the animal studies, because that reminds me of when was I? It was sometime this year, I don't know, a while ago, like half a year ago or so. That was it Marty, I think it was Marty Makary who said that, oh, you know what? We are not going to do animal studies anymore because that will make everything faster. That I thought that was just absolutely crazy.
It is crazy.
Do away with animal studies.
It is crazy. And I suspect he's retroactively managing the fallout for this to say, well, the animal studies, they're just not predictive and we don't need them, and let's spare the animals and so forth. I mean, those kinds of arguments are insane, frankly, because you need to do the animal studies before you give anything to humans, and they have been there for decades, and they're there for a reason, and they actually can detect a bunch of signals, and those signals need to be taken seriously and investigated. And here, none of this was done.
Yeah, I mean, like the biodistribution, Pfizer did this on these rats and found these horrific results in late 2020. Horrific results.
So now, so by the way, the animal studies need to be done because you can, you can sacrifice animals. Obviously, you can do extensive histopathology, which you can't do on humans, and so all these risks up front before you even proceed to humans. And that's what my work in pharma for a decade, before I retired, was right around that. So we were in early human safety, working primarily in healthy volunteers, we needed to assure that whatever we're not going to injure them. And so all those animal studies we were very, very extensively reviewing, and there's a lot of procedures we had to follow. So these studies are very useful. They must be done. Now, he's like Macquarie is saying going forward, the FDA won't require animal study, or going to eliminate animal studies. It's absolutely insane. It's reckless, and it's going to cause a lot of harm.
No, definitely will cause a lot of harm. I hope. It's so crazy that I hope they're not going to do that. It was so weird how nonchalantly he said this, as if it weren't a big deal. I mean, that's a huge,
it's a
huge deal.
Uh-huh.
I look at all these laws. There's so many laws around all of this. All sorts of stuff.
Yeah, so the representative product thing, that's one major area.
Well, this one here, when manufacturing process is not representative.
Yeah, so
yes.
That's one of the key deceptions that were pulled here. This whole preclinical package, and actually, to my knowledge, I am the only person who has fully reviewed what was made available from Moderna in the animal studies, and also Pfizer studies. And I don't know of anyone else who did the same analysis. But the key deception in that whole non-clinical package was that they compiled the data from non-representative product. So it's like if you are going to approve your apple juice and say on the label that it's organic apple juice, and then you turn around and you test bananas to comply with this label, right? So it's a non-representative product. Bananas don't apply to apples. And here, it's exactly what they did. The package consists of huge numbers of study, not huge, but so majority of the package, the non-clinical package, is done either in a totally different mRNA or some other substitute like luciferase, which is not mRNA. It's just a glow-in-the-dark dye. Or it's in couple of times when they did use the correct product, their own mRNA, all of those studies are non-GLP. So it's the switcheroo. Actually, I send you slides, the exhibit for Moderna. That's easy to understand. I'll show you.
So the conclusion here is the FDA failed to follow its own regulatory guidelines when it illegally granted BLAs to COVID-19 mRNA vaccines. And I think there's no way around to this conclusion. So I'm curious to see how they're going to deny the petition or say that it's mute or come up with they're going to come up with something. Just want to make sure if there was anything else. Oh, this one here, Sasha. That was really interesting. Specifically, it says here about the clinical studies. Moderna initiated human clinical studies on March 16, 2020. March 16, that was just after the lockdown. That was just when that was so unbelievable. March 16.
Yeah, March
they
16.
Initiated human clinical studies, so they knew all along.
Yeah.
I mean, I know this now, but when you see the date, so they did this, and there's your footnote here, 35, where you can prove that they did that. All right. I mean, March 16, 2020. And Pfizer initiated human clinical studies in April 2020. So they were, as you have shown and proved with this, they all knew.
Yeah, they knew.
The GLP requirements for BLA were not met. Yep. And you go into this and look at all. You can spend your life in this petition, go into all these links and start studying the law. There's a ton of stuff in here. I think the FDA is going to be impressed. I think you're ruining their holidays, Sasha.
Yeah.
They have to come up with something. This is really something. The pharmacology assessments were not performed for the mRNA COVID shots. Yeah, of course not. There was no reason to do that. And then they did some of this biodistribution was studied in male animals only, not in female
also
animals.
on the exhibit slides how that was pulled.
Yeah, I like this, the way how this is expressed here. Currently available BLA mRNA vaccines are EUA vaccines in disguise. They're just draping a little nice, shiny, beautiful, glittering BLA cape over the sewage. Oh yeah, here. So this is in the end, you say, with this petition, we look forward to the FDA's appropriate, tough regulatory action to remove COVID-19 mRNA vaccine licensure due to FDA's failure to follow federal law and its own regulatory guidance for BLA products. Yes. Appropriate, tough regulatory action. Well, this is this is a morally and scientifically bankrupt agency.
Yeah.
And that hasn't changed. That has not changed.
Yeah.
So it's not going to take appropriate, tough regulatory action. It's going to do something else.
My bet is they will either ignore or try to dismiss it somehow. CHD tells me, CHD reserves the right to sue HHS. And I hope if we get a non-response response, we proceed that way. But yes, this is absolute bankruptcy on many levels. It totally destroys the public trust and should destroy public trust in FDA or HHS or any regulatory processes, because look at what they've done. They've committed this atrocity and lied in a horrendous way and continue lying.
Exactly. Continue lying. So, yes, I hope that they will sue, and that's probably what they will do. And I see this like kind of the on-ramp, this petition to a lawsuit. Just like, we are going to give you the chance to do it yourself. But if you won't, then we are going to sue you.
Yeah.
So they have been warned.